Hello and welcome to the PowerSwitch, gaming's call-in talk radio show. My name is Peter Spezia, and today is July 23rd, 2017. This is the 32nd episode of the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We use Discord as a means to add and drop callers to talk about video games, and switch the power that is found in a typical gaming podcast. You can join our server to participate during recordings at rhymeswithasia.com/call. Well, I want to thank you for tuning back into the show. It has been a chaotic couple of weeks. I do apologize for missing last week as well. Going through a lot of big life changes at the moment. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago on our last episode, mentioned that my wife and I were starting the process of looking for a house, and we've already found one, and we've already put in an offer, and that offer's been accepted. So things are moving very quickly. The house has been inspected. It's in the middle of appraisal right now. We're closing in less than 3 weeks, and that's pretty crazy to think about. So not only will we be moving locations to where this show is currently recorded, but there is going to be a lot that goes into, starting up a new place of residence. So I hope that this doesn't impact future weeks and delays and all that, but I can't say that for sure. I know that once we'll be settled, we can get back into the flow of things. There are no odd sleep schedules that we have to work around now anymore, so we can be more flexible with recording times and figure out what works for the show. But yeah, you've caught the show at an interesting time. If you either are a fan or if you've just joined the show, a lot of changes on the home front, so it's going to be big. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the end topic of the show. Going to talk about some changes to media and kind of get some different opinions out there. But first, we'll start the show. We'll go through a few segments if you're new. We'll go through quickly the games that I'm playing. We'll go through a headline roundup of the last week or so in gaming news. And then we'll go through the show's main topic. We'll talk for about 10 minutes or so. Then we get to the callers. That's the meat of the show here on the Power Switch. Have people call in like a talk radio show and get opinions out there. We'll wrap the show up with a little end segment, as I mentioned, and we'll call it a day, hopefully in about an hour's time. Let's get to some more housekeeping, though, I suppose. I was listening to other Game of the Year podcasts, at least so far, like the halfway point for Game of the Year so far, and hearing a couple other interesting options that, just comparing what I said last week and hearing some more opinions on it. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is another game that is coming up a lot on people's, possible Game of the Year so far. And it's I guess it makes sense. It's kind of breaking some new ground for an early access game, getting a big player base there on Steam. And also a lot of people talking about Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, particularly if they're playing in VR. That is one I have to play as well. It's kind of sitting there right now on the PS4 waiting for me to get to it. Not with VR though, but I'm interested to at least try it. Survival horror, not necessarily my genre of choice, but I would like to get to it. I am playing or have been playing a few games. So I got to play Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue. What a nightmare of a chapter that is, or a title, but it was an interesting installment in the Kingdom Hearts series. As we wait for Kingdom Hearts 3 and the news that comes out there, got to play the section of the game, the little segment of the story that is running in that Unreal Engine and kind of emulating what Kingdom Hearts 3 will play like. This is, kind of Aqua's story in the dark world, and I found it pretty interesting to try different things and all that. But at the end of that game plays an interesting element. I won't spoil it for those that still have yet to get to it. It is a 2017 game after all, but just a 2 to 3 hour little chapter that was pretty rewarding to play as a Kingdom Hearts fan. Good tie-in to the story. I didn't necessarily see the movie, the little cutscene movie that was on there. I could always watch it on YouTube, and I've played Dream Drop Distance before, so I didn't necessarily need to go through that, but that was just a little rent, try it, send it back. Also played Monument Valley. We had Annika call in last episode and recommend that. A good mobile game. Very much, MC Escher, she talked about, rotating the world and seeing how that changes as you move your character around the structure and avoid enemies. And I liked that there wasn't a death state where you had to restart over. It's more just the enemies were an annoyance. I did appreciate that. Not a particularly difficult game, a pretty quick game. They do have the sequel that's out, and I'm definitely tempted by that after playing it. But yeah, really, really fun little puzzle game. Definitely similarities to a game like Echochrome on PlayStation, PS3. Also Fez, very similar, where you're rotating the world and seeing how that changes the environment, what you're allowed to do based on that. And then I just got to play Severed this week. It was a PS Plus game a couple weeks ago. Severed on multiple devices, but I played it on PlayStation Vita. You can also get it on iOS, 3DS. I think it's also on Wii U. But a very touch-based game. And in the sense where you're doing first-person dungeon crawling, encountering new enemies, change elements of the dungeon so you can progress to new areas. But the main element is the combat where you're slashing across the screen with your finger. And that can get pretty frantic, especially in the later parts of the game where you got to deal out as much damage as possible. Short strokes get lower damage, longer strokes get higher damage, since you're going all across the screen. As when the enemies have open weak points, you got to deal as much damage as possible. So it can get pretty physically intense. Good short game, probably about 5.5 hours if you want to beat it for the first time. But if you want to do full completion, I'd say that's about 7.5 hours. So I did get the platinum trophy on that. I really enjoyed that. That's from Drinkbox Studios. They made Guacamelee before, so they kind of have built up a pretty good Metroidvania pedigree, if that's the kind of game you're looking for. So check out Severed for sure, but also check out Guacamelee from a few years ago. That's a very good game as well. So just a few small games. I do want to get into playing some more games, but this house stuff, it's definitely taking up a big priority. It's pretty crazy to think that in 1 week we had started to look with a realtor, and then suddenly we're already accepted for a place. And so that'll be exciting, but a lot of work to go into it for sure. Let's get now to our headline roundup. EVO 2017 has come and gone. That's from last week. You were catching up a couple weeks here for news, but we had Super Smash Bros. Melee. We had Armada beat Mango. That's a big classic rivalry in the Melee scene. On Smash Bros. Wii U, Salem, who is no stranger to the upset scene, is a brawl champion as well. But Salem, with his Bayonetta, beat Zero, the longtime seemingly undefeated champion in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, and his Diddy Kong Salem with the victory for EVO 2017. Street Fighter V was a pretty interesting one as well, with Tokido beating Punk. Punk representing Panda Global Gaming. I see you there, Panda Global. And Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, the last year in EVO for that game before it eventually, I'm sure, moves over to Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. You had Ryan LV with his Chun-Li, Morgan, and Phoenix team beating NY Chris G. You had the D23 Games panel. That was a pretty big one on July 15th. Sure, they talked about Star Wars Battlefront 2, and they had Marvel's Spider-Man. There was, some more looks into it. Not too much big news, though. You had some new games announced, though. You had Star Wars Jedi Challenges, where it looks like Disney's going to be partnering with Lenovo to build some sort of augmented reality visor. They had this tease with a lightsaber, and you'll probably be able to do that. But they also talked about playing the holographic chess game that appears in the original Star Wars movie. So keep an eye on that. If Disney's going to try moving into a partnership for a hardware space, we'll see how the VR and AR market continues to expand. Also talked about Marvel Powers United VR. This is an Oculus Rift exclusive, for now at least, where you have different possible teammates, different powers for Hulk, Rocket Raccoon, Captain Marvel, and Deadpool, it seems, as well. Though that was a kind of a hidden character, and then some more media outlets were trying, and that got out there, I think. But of course, the big news was Kingdom Hearts 3. Seeing the Toy Story world, that was big. To see that Pixar finally will get some representation. After Toy Story happened, it's like, oh yeah. You were hearing a couple other podcasts thinking that, that those are deep in Kingdom Hearts communities, saying like, kind of getting some rumblings and feelings that would happen. And yeah, of course, get Pixar finally some representation. Looking gorgeous, of course. I mean, it doesn't take much to have big improvements from the 1995 movie. You think about computing back then, and now we have 2017 and 2018 for a release window for the game. Do we expect that to be delayed from that? Of course. It's Kingdom Hearts 3. What has it been so far? Announced originally in 2013 and keep pushing back and back. But it's good to at least see some sort of commitment. And if it gets pushed from there, we'll we'll be able to say told you so there. So of course, yeah, we can talk still about, Frozen. I'm sure will eventually get announced. Maybe Moana. Would Moana be too soon? But yeah, Toy Story. Wow, yeah, that was kind of a no-brainer. Great to see, though. I look forward to seeing what it'll be with the English version, because you're definitely seeing those Japanese voices for Woody and for Buzz. And so, but the world's looking great. Definitely looking forward to that for sure. Telltale put together a Nintendo Direct-like presentation where they announced new games for 2018. First off was Batman: The Enemy Within. That's going to be Season 2 of Batman: The Telltale series. First episode already coming out August 8th. That's pretty wild. I'm excited for that one for sure. You also have The Walking Dead, the final season, so that will be Season 4. I'm glad they at least kind of mentioned some sort of season to have The Walking Dead: A New Frontier for Season 3, technically. That was kind of an odd departure, but it seems like we're going to wrap things up here, and that'll be good for 2018. And finally, The Wolf Among Us Season 2. It seemed like something that they weren't going to necessarily do, but a lot of fan feedback. I really enjoyed Season 1, and so I'm happy to see Season 2 confirmed for The Wolf Among Us in 2018. That's definitely big news for fans of those games, and I'll get to talking more about that soon. But Pokémon GO introduced legendary characters of Lugia and Articuno. They had their Go Fest out in Chicago. Now, some oddities with, servers crashing and not necessarily having the best live experience for those that flew out or live near Chicago, but to all gather in person, they did unlock Lugia as a sort of legendary raid character, and then I guess for a contest across the world, which team would catch the most Pokemon. So Team Mystic won that, thus Articuno. They say Zapdos and Moltres representing the other teams will be coming soon, but right now it's just Lugia and Articuno, and some people already have both, and that's pretty crazy. It seems very difficult to attain those. The Nintendo Online app launched for smartphones in conjunction with this past Friday's release of Splatoon 2, failing to impress. The biggest problem, aside from it just being bare bones, and it's a foundation for when you're saying people need to pay for this in 2018, I think they got to improve a bit there, but the biggest problem clearly is the fact that there is no app multitasking on the phone. If you're communicating, you gotta leave your phone unlocked for one. That's absurd. You can't even lock your phone. But say you wanted to look up a strategy guide or answer a text message, you leave that app, your call is disconnected. I don't know what it is with Nintendo and online functionality. You'd think even with the DNA partnership, that should be a no-brainer. Working on mobile devices, that this publisher, baffling. I hope it's something that can be patched, because Splatoon 2 seems like a great game from all reviews and from everyone who's played it, but man, you don't want this to be a blot on the game's future success. Getting to Overwatch, though, the Overwatch League announced teams that have interesting sports owner connections. You have Bob Kraft of the New England Patriots and the COO of the Mets, Jeff Wilpon, fronting the Boston and New York teams respectively. Now, as someone who is not particularly interested in Overwatch like myself, I find myself intrigued by Overwatch League because it's a different approach on esports. Now, most esports, they have the teams, whether it's Cloud9 or Panda Global, and they try to have different footings in different games. And so, yeah, you'll see different sponsors, pop up there, and they try to build good teams in different games there. But the Overwatch League seems to be taking the approach that it's very much like how major sports are built in North America, it's very city-based, and they recruit based on cities, and you build the teams there. So there are 7 teams at the moment in Overwatch League. You have Boston, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Miami, Orlando, Shanghai, and Seoul. And to have that be a foundation, they say that's based on the biggest concentration of Overwatch players, and it's a good starting point. I think if you want to expand more internationally, you could do a London team, you could do a Rio de Janeiro team, but that's entirely possible. But to start with that, and if you want to think of what do sports do to have engender that support, I think have it be very local based and have it be easy to follow based on a specific game, but also localized teams. It'll be interesting to watch the Overwatch League and see how it does. Though I guess I saw an article where Major League Baseball may be interested in having a lawsuit because of its logo. I think that's a huge stretch with the white character based on a two-tone color scheme. I can see maybe this sort of comparisons, but they're they're definitely distinctive and different. So that's a little absurd. And finally, Nintendo files a Nintendo 64 controller trademark application based on the timing of when this happened, at least for Super Nintendo. This would suggest that not only are we having an NES, or Super Nintendo rather, Classic coming later this year, Nintendo 64 Classic may be on the horizon, maybe for next year or possibly sooner. So it's getting people talking about, what N64 games do you want to see on it? And it's making me wonder, is there going to be a stopping point? I can't imagine a GameCube Classic, being, 2 years down the line. That seems absurd. But if they stop at N64 Classic, fair enough. But then you're going to start, talking about, you got to sell those controllers. Are you going to sell 4 controllers with an N64 Classic? Because that was the big deal with that system, the 4-player multiplayer. So something to keep an eye on, start speculating with lists. But if an N64 Classic does come to pass next year, this would be the starting point of when that conversation started to happen, at least in the fan space. But let's get to the main topic, though, and it is about Telltale Games' plans for 2018. I kind of wanted to run through at least the games that they have already confirmed that they're working on, or at least they're still in the progress points of. And then we can kind of speculate, I guess, could other series from their past be continued, or what new series could be established? Because Telltale Games really started as a very small studio for the point-and-click sort of adventure, all the way back with Sam and Max, and then, gosh, even in the Wii days, you had Strong Bad's Cool Game for Attractive People, based on the Homestar Runner property. And then they kind of expanded there. Once they got big properties, you remember, Jurassic Park and Back to the Future, and those weren't reviewed too well, but it was really in 2012 with The Walking Dead Season 1. That really kind of placed Telltale's footing in the industry. They have a very specific style of game with making dialogue choices and making those big decisions. And if you have not played a Telltale game, I would say, maybe Walking Dead Season 1 is the place to start. Kind of see where that's begun. And it's still, such a high quality, great storytelling and, rather simplistic gameplay. Some quick time events, some cursor moving, and then quick time events. The gameplay is very simple, and then sometimes you're wandering across a world, but it's really about the storytelling and those choices. And I do enjoy playing Telltale Games, though when I look back on all these properties, I really think that I've played probably the best ones. And that's kind of strange to say. Maybe I've strayed away from some of the middling reviews or not as well reviews, or maybe just properties I don't necessarily care for. But yeah, let's get into 2018's plans for Telltale, because what started as a very small studio has grown to be working on, currently they have 5 properties and 5 games that they're working on, either in pre-production or currently in production, and that's crazy to think about. So as we mentioned during the headline roundup, Batman: The Enemy Within, one of my top 10 favorite games last year was Batman: The Telltale series, and I'm glad that they're turning around a second season quickly, but so quickly. Episode 1 of season 2 to be coming out in 2 weeks. It's very surprising. Don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled. I loved it where season 1 went. How it kind of put twists on the Batman canon as we know, but using that good Telltale storytelling style. And so yeah, I'm really excited. The teaser trailer hinted that Riddler would play a part, but there are certainly a lot of characters from season 1 that could be making their return. You have The Walking Dead, the final season, and this is interesting for me because I still need to play A New Frontier. Heard a lot of things about, they're trying to introduce new characters, but the way they still try to bring in Clementine in the 3rd season almost seemed like it was a story detraction, which is interesting. So maybe you don't care as much for the new characters, and maybe Clementine plays too big of a role. But I did play the first 2 rather extensively, the first 2 seasons, and really loved what they were doing with those characters. So I'll have to get to playing season 3, A New Frontier. But again, your final season, good that they're wrapping that up. Put that one to bed, work on new properties. I think that's really good to see. But The Wolf Among Us season 2 is really, really exciting. To take the Fables graphic novel series, which I had no association with, no knowledge that it existed, but to make me care about that world and put twists on, classic fairy tales and characters that you may associate with Disney, but to put them in new, dark, film noir sort of style lights. very, very excited to see what they're doing with season 2 there. So Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us, both 2018 scheduled. So could be, mid-year, could be later in the year, or could be early in 2018. So there's still a lot there. But Telltale is still currently working on 2 other series. That's, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, the Telltale series. There are 2 episodes through on that one. And again, that's another one where it's it's okay. But, maybe it's starting to show its age with the Telltale formula. The big knock against Telltale is its tech, right? So those who have played Telltale games know that they built an engine and it worked really well for The Walking Dead, but because they have to provide to so many platforms, be it console, PC, mobile, to try to get that big audience, to have an engine that works, in so many different avenues, it's pretty prone to crashes every now and then. And then you're trying to involve things like, now we have some more physics, or the graphics have improved a little bit. People have been wanting to have Telltale just revamp and just build a new engine from scratch. And when they're working on so much, I'm not sure they'll really have the time or energy to do so. But hey, if they want to hire software engineers in the background and just start working on it, by all means. But yeah, very middling review scores currently for Guardians of the Galaxy, though I hope that turns around. You'd like to see a Marvel partnership, especially with their new games outfit, work. And they also have Minecraft Story Mode Season 2, which is 1 episode out, but those have longer seasons. I think Season 1 had 8 episodes. That's pretty unusual for the standard 5 episode norm for a Telltale series. But someone who does not have much Minecraft connection like me, not particularly interested in that one, I guess. So you do have other series from the studio's past. You have Tales from the Borderlands, which was excellent. Game of Thrones, which was average. Again, another kind of middling review score. And then you have their past before The Walking Dead. So yeah, Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, Puzzle Agent, Poker Night at the Inventory was something entirely different, but still getting different characters from different series to play. Texas Hold'em. Then you have Hector, Badge of Carnage, as you mentioned, Strong Bad's Cool Games for Attractive People, and Sam and Max. So you have these 5 series with Batman, Walking Dead, Wolf Among Us, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Minecraft for 2018. But could there be new series on the horizon? You think lately Telltale has kind of brought in series that have a good amount of nerd cachet. So you got to wonder, what is still out there? And it's going to be interesting to kind of think about what could happen. I mean, maybe we'll put together a list in the future of what are the top 5 most likely Telltale franchises. I think just, what immediately jumps out at me is if Disney gets on board and says, do a Telltale Star Wars game. I think we'll almost hit the apex of, maybe the Telltale attention or something like that. I wonder when does the bubble burst? Because I love these games and I do want to get to play more of them, but when is enough enough? When do we hit that peak where maybe people will become sick of it? Maybe when it hits that technical bubble. It'll be interesting to see. But as a big fan of Telltale's games and someone who really enjoys the narrative push in games, they're a developer that I'd like to keep my eye on, and I'm very curious on their plans for 2018, and curious if you are as well, because that's what I have to say. When we come back, we will get to the callers. What do you think? We can talk about anything from that headline roundup. We can talk about Telltale. We can talk about games that you're playing recently, or even your favorite games. So many possible things to talk about in case you don't have any idea what to talk about at the moment. That'll be when we come back here on the Power Switch.
It's always a climb, but I won't save you.
Welcome back to the Power Switch. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say, whether it's about Telltale Games or Evo or any of the other stories we talked about. This has been an exciting couple of weeks, whether it's big tournaments or big announcements. We're coming off of Comic-Con, and it's also interesting to see, not only is it big for, nerd news as a whole, but not as much of a video game sort of show right there. But it's been an interesting time, interesting couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to getting back to you, the callers. So let's hear what you have to say. Joining us from New Jersey, Matt, welcome back to the Power Switch.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back to the show. What do you have in mind to talk about today?
So when it comes to Telltale, the thing about it is that a lot of people online have started to sort of lose faith in Telltale and the Telltale formula. Mm-hmm. And you get the people that never really understood it in the first place saying, oh, your choices never really mattered. The same story happens one way or another, which is obviously unreasonable for countless reasons.
Yes.
But I think that there is definitely a way in which the Telltale formula has started to fail, and it hasn't really had that same magic since Walking Dead Season 1. And I can point out like exactly why I think that that's happened and like what the catalyst for that was.
I'm curious to hear this. What do you have in mind?
In The Walking Dead Season 1, in every Telltale game, actually, it begins with showing you the message that the game experience is tailored to how you play. It adapts to your choices. And in Walking Dead Season 1, I'd say that that was 100% accurate. The same overall story happened, but the game made sure to take into account the things that you had said and throw them back at you at certain points.
Right.
If there's one point that I remember very specifically in the second episode where you can tell offhand these strangers that you just met who the leader of your group is, and then it's just any offhand line, doesn't mean anything. It's not even one of the major choices that you make. And then later on in that episode, when they offer for you to come join them for a little bit, indulge in some of the stuff they've got going on, you can say that you'll need to see what someone else thinks. And the game will specifically bring up if you said two different people there. They'll say, hold on, I thought you said the other person was the leader. And then the main character, Lee, has to backtrack on that and come up with an excuse for it. That's only one example of something that happens over and over and over throughout that game.
Yeah.
The Telltale Games say that characters will remember what you say. And in Season 1, they really genuinely do remember it.
Yes.
It's not just the big major choices that are the story beats every now and then. Every single line of dialogue that you choose to say in that game has the potential to come back later for you to be reminded of it. Even if it doesn't change the story in any big way, it still feels like every time you play that game, you're making that game your own story. And that's what's missing from Telltale's later games. Now, I admit I've only played their Walking Dead games, and I've seen people play Minecraft Story Mode, which Minecraft Story Mode does not have the greatest reviews, and I think it's earned that. It seems pretty mediocre, kind of a bad story, and generally the worst offender of nothing you do matters.
Yeah, I mean, I love Patton Oswalt, but like him being as the lead like doesn't get me in the door.
No, and in Walking Dead Season 2, you start to see that the game doesn't really remind you of the choices you've made very often. And you can see that a lot of the choices that you make are invalidated in the weirdest ways. If you're trying to stop someone who's just been bitten in one example, then another character will be furious at you for hurting them, even though they're bitten. There's nothing you can do. It feels like the game is starting to railroad you a bit, but it's still overall pretty good. Walking Dead Season 3, New Frontier, is where the formula has completely broken down. In this game, not only do your choices not matter, but they're invalidated within seconds of you making them. The game has already decided which choice it wants you to make, and the dialogue will continue as though you made that choice. In the beginning of the first episode of New Frontier, there's a moment where you have the option to shoot an unarmed person who is trying to run away. Then afterwards, you're confronted by a stranger who is threatening you, and they ask, why should they trust you? If you chose not to shoot the unarmed person and let them run away, then your character will say, I could have shot that person there, but I didn't. And then the stranger that's threatening you will say, yes, but you could have. So literally within moments, the choice that you just made doesn't matter. And the minute-to-minute dialogue doesn't make any sense. They say at the beginning of Walking Dead Season 1, the little tutorial pop-ups say that silence is a valid option.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where you're being held captive in A New Frontier where the character with you, who's holding you captive, is yelling at you to shut up and stay quiet. If you do, in fact, stay silent, he keeps yelling at you, saying that he's not going to listen to what you're going to say.
Oh, jeez.
Walking Dead: A New Frontier is the worst offender of the Telltale formula breaking down in a way that they really don't care to have your choices matter. They don't care to adapt the gameplay to the way that you play. And again, I've only played the Walking Dead games. I can't speak to Telltale's other games, but I think that that's probably the reason that people are starting to get a bit disillusioned and feel like it's the illusion of choice instead of any real choice. And looking back, I think that I know why that happened. It's because the three main writers for Walking Dead Season 1, Sean Vanneman, Mark Darren, and Gary Whitta, have not worked on any Telltale games since.
Yep.
Mark Darren is still with the company as a creative designer, but he's not the writer for anything else that they're doing. Sean Vanneman left the country to make Firewatch. And Gary Whitta, I think he's left the company. He seems to be working for Lucasfilm right now, writing episodes of Star Wars Rebels and also a co-writer on Rogue One.
Yeah, he was one of the lead screenwriters on Rogue One, yeah, as you said. So that is interesting. It's a good point, and after not playing Season 3 yet, that is disheartening to hear. What I like about Telltale's games, and it seems like in certain examples, as you said, Season 1 is a great example of when they had those key choices and when certain characters are killed off, and it helps the replayability when you're stuck with certain characters, based on the choices you made. And it feels like those are permanent actions. And it felt like that magic in a way was kind of recaptured when I played Batman, the Telltale series, because the way that the choices kind of evolve the story, it doesn't feel like you're being railroaded down necessarily one path, in the sense that in the bridge between episode 3 and episode 4, or it might be, but yeah, it's between 4 and 5. Between episode 4 and episode 5, you're going against basically two of Batman's enemies, the rivals in a way. And basically, based on the choices that you make, you play entirely different scenes, essentially, one at the end of episode 4 and another at the beginning of episode 5. But you could miss the whole alternative based on that, based on the choice that you make. So it's nice when in certain series or episodes, like those kind of choices like really matter. But oh gosh, when it's something like that you mentioned, that it's just quickly invalidated, yeah, that's tough. But no, I mean, yeah, it's tough to lose good screenwriters and good writers that put writing first before, we have to work this out in a game sense.
Yeah, I feel Walking Dead Season 1, I think, was more of a passion project for the company. And then once it was wildly successful, by far the most successful thing the company had ever done to that point, they zeroed in on that and decided this is what we need to keep doing. And it's something that you see in every field when something gets really big. You want to copy it and continue that success. And I've noted it even especially with YouTubers. There's the famous Mr. Plinkett reviews of the Star Wars prequels. The reviews of those three movies are really great, but every time the character of Mr. Plinkett has appeared since, it doesn't feel quite the same, because the writer and performer Mike Stacklasa, he created those videos from a point of knowing that he had something that he wanted to say, and he had a fully formed idea in his head before he ever started the video. When it comes to the later videos, he's making them because people want more Mr. Plinkett. Mm-hmm. That's why those videos aren't as good. I think it's why people are starting to get tired of Telltale, because I think that Telltale isn't making these games anymore because they have an idea and because they want to. I think it's because this is where they're making most of their money, and they're just pouring it into every franchise. And it's frankly kind of scary how many different projects they have going on for the size of their studio.
Yeah, I mean, they've gotten way bigger, but yeah, there's certainly a lot of properties. And maybe it's just a case of, when a certain property comes calling, you don't say no. And I get the feeling that happened with DC, that happened with Marvel. Now the DC one seems to be working out, certainly well with Batman, but I mean, you look at Guardians of the Galaxy, and like that seems like something that would be ideal for Telltale, but like it's not clicking, it seems, at least critically.
I think that the fact that they're straining and struggling to get everything together working like this, it's starting to show.
Mm-hmm. And I do appreciate the Red Letter Media shout out there. I mean, when you look at the Mr. Plinkett review, particularly for The Force Awakens, like it was still good, but there's as you said, there's some magic about the prequels and those reviews in particular. But it's a good thing. If you don't know Red Letter Media, go check out their work. Half in the Bag, the other shows, definitely check that out. It's really, really interesting insight. And yeah, I didn't really think about following it to the screenwriter level. I didn't even click to me that Gary Whitta worked on the first season of The Walking Dead. But yeah, he's done great work since. And yeah, you have the Firewatch connection though. I said, from one of the writers of The Walking Dead season 1. It's like, oh yeah, there is that too. Firewatch is another one I have to get to.
And Firewatch, I haven't been able to play yet, but I've heard extraordinary things about it. So it's clear that the talent of those writers hasn't disappeared.
Yeah.
What with Firewatch itself, Rogue One, and Star Wars Rebels being very well received, it's very clear that the talent that worked on that first season is still very talented.
Yeah.
They're just not still at that studio.
Yeah, maybe it all comes back to seeing who is on the writing crew for that game and what their lineage is, because for those Telltale games, like the gameplay doesn't matter, like it's so inconsequential, but when writing and narrative is everything, like that needs to be where the talent is. Yeah,
and it reminds me of when people throw around the name BioWare, because they loved their earlier games like Baldur's Gate. I think it's literally no one that worked on Baldur's Gate is still at that company. So when people look at a new BioWare announcement and say Baldur's Gate was great, the Mass Effect trilogy was great, well, those studios have changed a lot. The name BioWare is just a name.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the same people are there.
Yeah, and you talk about BioWare with their big shakeup of Aaron Flynn moving on from the company as general manager, Casey Hudson coming back to lead that studio. Casey Hudson being the front point man essentially for the Mass Effect trilogy. And so when you wonder like, well, what happened with Mass Effect Andromeda? And there's a whole litany of reasons why, but it doesn't help when the big lead creative mind behind it leaves the company and is not there for Andromeda. So, but yeah, it's a good point. Well, Matt, I appreciate the insight. Thank you for calling in. Anything you would like to plug?
I think it would be remiss if I didn't bring up what I consider to be one of the best culminations of the Telltale formula in Until Dawn. Currently,
gosh, yeah.
If you have PlayStation Plus, is free for this month. I just finished the game very recently, and I have some specific problems with it of things that I don't like. But as far as the Telltale formula itself and following that, it does an extraordinary job. Everything you say to another character, everything you do matters in the relationships that you have with those characters, and the relationships that you have with them will affect major points of the story, major decisions that you make. And ultimately, the way that the game ends will be decided on how those characters feel about each other based on every small line of dialogue that you choose to say. It's the best example because even when there aren't any significant changes from a given line, that line will still contribute to the relationship values that will affect major decisions later. And so that's why, if not the best, then Until Dawn is one of the best of the Telltale formula type games. And I think it's free for another 2 weeks, I think, on PlayStation
Something
Plus,
like that, yeah.
if you currently have it. So I think if you're interested in the kind of game that Telltale makes, it's a no-brainer.
For sure, yeah. Supermassive did a great job with that, and it is amazing. I played it, maybe half a year ago at this point, but it's so good. If you have a PlayStation Plus account, definitely get that in your library. But if you do miss it, I mean, the game will be $20, $15 maybe. If you can't play it right now, save it for October. That is prime spook season sort of game territory, and it's one of the better looking games, at least when it's trying for realism and faces and all that with the facial capture. One of the better looking games on PS4. So do not miss Until Dawn. Give it a shot.
The game definitely does look very good. Not only like the faces, but also the environments and everything. Very, very good.
Oh, and Peter Stormare as the Doctor is spooky. He's spooky.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
He does a really great job.
Yeah.
Mr. Robot's in it too. Hayden Panettiere's in it.
One of the guys from
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Ward from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah.
All of them pretending that they're teenagers.
Of course. Yeah. No, that's a great plug. Do not miss Until Dawn. Really appreciate that one being shout out. Well, Matt, thanks for your time, and you have a great night.
Of course. You too.
And joining us from Illinois, Video Game Guru 64. Welcome back to the Power Switch.
Good to be back.
Thank you for calling in. What would you like to talk about today?
I would like to talk about Evo and how that Smash final was bonkers as Bayonetta just threw Diddy Kong out of the top of the stage.
That was pretty amazing, like an off-screen kill, and it really came down to the wire. It was remarkable.
Yeah, it was like, and how Salem he came back from losers bracket, and yeah,
That really makes it more impressive. Yeah, Zero
yeah,
being such a juggernaut, and you remember, he won the tournament for when it was at E3, and they had the Smash Brothers Invitational and all that, and he beat Hungrybox. He's been on top of the Smash Brothers Wii U world, and I'm pretty sure it was Salem who, back in the Brawl days when Meta Knight seemed unbeatable, came out of nowhere, and I don't think it was at an Evo, maybe it was like an Apex or something like that, but it came out of nowhere with a Zero Suit Samus and knocked out Meta Knight.
and another thing was I couldn't get Twitch to load on the Evo night, so Disney XD was having the Evo finals for Smash.
That's right, yeah.
So it's like, oh my god, I can watch Evo on TV.
That's pretty
Finally.
exciting. Now, ESPN2 had the partnership with Street Fighter V, and they've had that for the last couple of years. Always interesting to see the Twitter reaction when it's like, oh, what are video games doing on my sports network? But Disney XD makes a lot of sense for Smash Brothers, and I've been hearing some different stories on Twitter of how it's done so well with kids that were watching. And you're getting reports from parents just like, my kids watched with their friends and they're playing Smash Brothers all the time and they want me to buy a Wii U. And it makes you think, get Smash Brothers on Switch already. What are you doing?
Yeah,
like pointing them to a
exactly.
dead console. It's absurd.
Exactly. Well, hopefully they will get Smash on Switch next year.
I hope so.
But,
If it's
yeah,
not in the first half of 2018, I think they're missing the big boat. You can talk about how, oh, you don't want too many local multiplayer games. Well, isn't that what you're selling with Switch? I hear so many
Yeah.
people saying
Yeah.
that, I'm at the airport and I'm playing Mario Kart. I'm in a Switch commercial. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. You're gonna, break off that screen. You're gonna get
And
those Joy-Cons.
Splatoon.
Yeah, it's Splatoon 2. They want to talk about like the esports angle. I mean, it's right there for the picking. I'm about to go on vacation in a little bit, so I can imagine that we'll be playing some, Mario Kart up in a cabin by a lake, and we'll be playing that. That's the Switch dream. Get Smash on there already. Come on.
So, you haven't played Splatoon yet, right?
I have not. I had the unfortunate incident with GameFly when they sent me a defective disc, and I really did want to play that, at least the single player, which I heard was fantastic. And then I missed out on the test fire because we were doing all sorts of stuff for the house.
I hear Splatoon 2, it's not that different. It has a few different mechanics, but otherwise it's kind of the same. And it's probably better because you can use more weapons. Splatoon 1, you can only use one weapon in single player.
Yeah, and that's in a way like when it's broke. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Like that kind of thing, right? If it's already so good, you don't have to make too many changes to it. I think that's why they add the horde mode, or as we like to say, the horde mode.
Yes,
adding that sort of mode there. That's good for extending the content that's on the cartridge there. But yeah, you add the more weapons, you add some more maps. I think that really helps. And again, it's that portability factor that's really going to help. I hear very good things overall.
I brought my Switch to my local card gaming place because yesterday was the pre-release for a new set of Pokemon cards. Waiting for it all to start up, I pulled out my Switch, got a few matches of Splatoon in, and well, I guess two other people pulled out the Switch and got Splatoon matches in. Well, I guess one other person because I don't.
Well,
But, yeah.
that's awesome. That's the dream, right? That's really cool. Did you get to try the online app yet? Any experience with that?
I hear it's not that good, and I know people are streaming Splatoon 2, and they're on my friends list. And suddenly they get a phone call, or I mean, like app call to say, you are invited to play Splatoon 2 with this random person. It's like, yeah, I don't want to do that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you, and that's part of the tough thing is, I mean, as much as we love Discord for making this show work with all the different callers, like, why just not use Discord? That seems to be the way, and I do hope that Nintendo figures it out. But because especially when they want people to pay for the service, you got to make it a little more user intuitive.
And the other fact is, you can't use other apps as well as when you're talking to people. You can't go to another app and see what's up with Twitter or something. You have to stay on that Nintendo Online app.
And that's so absurd. And like when you can't even lock the phone, it's like, has Nintendo used a mobile phone? Have any of the developers used a mobile phone? You think between that and then you think of the headphones and the cord connections and where it all has to go and use this external thing. Like, what are you thinking? It makes me think of, I follow a couple of people who are, pretty kind of close to the Nintendo and development sort of side of things. And they share this story, and I have no way of verifying if it's true or not, but it at least makes for possibly a humorous insight of why maybe things work. Kind of a tale originally posted on Reddit of how when they were kind of developing a Nintendo Online system, and they had different contractors come in to pitch the idea, and they're talking about, oh, well, like on Xbox Live and like on PlayStation Network, and comparing different features to things like that, and like halfway through, like they're all quiet and not saying much, and then after a certain point they had someone speak up, because Japanese company and all, it basically like, can you stop referring to those services? Nobody here knows or has any experience with those services. I'm like, if that's true, that would be shocking, but also would make a lot of sense, because if you have such a disconnect between how online services for games should work versus what you created, like it's flabbergasting.
Yeah, that's a really bad situation to be in, because I don't use Xbox Live or PlayStation, but I know of them, and I know how good they are to have online communications with, and getting across with Nintendo is like, what have you been doing these past 10 5 maybe years?
And I get if they wanted to cut costs for the system itself to not have that built in. I'm okay with that. If you want a mobile app, fine, but at least do your due diligence, developing that. So that's really just kind of shocking there. But I do hope that that turns around. Splatoon 2 seems to be very well reviewed, and it just continues this rollout of at least every month a really good game kind of rolling out. I mean, in August we'll see, at the end of the month we'll see Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle.
Well, and I know this is not a real big game, but Fate Extella is coming out like day of this. So
okay,
I don't know who would want to buy this. I'm personally gonna buy it, but I don't know what like other Fates fans would.
I've heard good things about the Fate series, but yeah, it's definitely a niche audience for sure. In a couple weeks, you're gonna have the big appeal of to have Sonic Mania be portable on Switch. That's really exciting. So there's definitely good games coming to the system. It's gonna make its turn at the holiday season. Super Mario Odyssey is gonna be a big one for it. There's a lot to like with Switch, but gotta figure out that online before you start having people charge for it at the beginning of the year, and at least make it clear what's happening with Virtual Console. Because man, I want to take my retro games portably and not get collector's items to just play retro games on a TV. Well, Video Game Guru 64, appreciate the insight. Thank you for calling in. What would you like to plug today?
Yes. Well, I do have my fun code on Switch that posting in the Discord.
There you go. And,
if anyone would want to join me on Splatoon 2, hit me up.
There you go. You can find it in our Discord. You can find you on Twitter at VideoGameGuru64. And so, yeah, check that out there if you want to play Splatoon 2. That's a great plug. Good, social network. Get that shout out there. Thanks for your time. You have a great night, all right?
Yep, you too.
All right, thanks for the calls, guys. When we come back, we'll talk about having some thoughts on upgrading to the next step in media. You'll see what I'm talking about. It's an interesting transition I'm about to go through with my media experience, and that will be when we come back here on the Power Switch. Welcome back to the Power Switch. This week's Tempo Control music is brought to you by Transistor. You can find a new video game music top 10 list from a specific video game soundtrack every Tuesday over at youtube.com/rhymeswithasia. Now, I'd like to give a thought on 4K and upgrading to 4K media and 4K gaming. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I am in the process of moving house in the next month or so. We close in the middle of August, if not sooner, and at least assuming everything goes well. Yeah, there could be, just an unforeseen pitfall that just foils the whole thing, but everything's moving along just fine. Everything's looking good. It's really exciting, after my wife's been here from a couple years from England, and we've been living with our brother, and it's been a really good situation to start saving money, but we need that place of our own. And as a result, we've been in the process now of kind of planning out how we're going to divide up all of our things, because, I've lived with my brother, most of my life, aside from when I was away at university, and we've built up a lot of things, but things have to be fairly divided. And so it's going to come to the point where, we are going to need to kind of almost create a new entertainment center setup for our new place. And it comes to the point of saying, yeah, maybe this is the time that we make the jump to a 4K TV. And that's kind of interesting to think about, because we're still at a point with 4K TVs, I would say, where you definitely don't have the mass adoption yet. But for most quality sets, they've come down in price to the point where it's at a point where, when 1080p TVs were catching on, like those same price points are right about there. It's it can be very affordable depending on the size that you get. So doing a lot of research there, thinking the 4K TV, probably something like a sound bar, which is interesting, kind of moving away from the usual receiver and speaker sort of setup. You do get more power when you're with the receiver, but at least the sound bar, can be affordable, get good sound out of it, simpler connections, which is going to help at least starting out. And tying back into gaming, this means we're probably going to be making the jump to not only a PS4 Pro, but an Xbox One S, kind of leaving these current systems with my brother in order to jump up to something that is 4K and HDR compatible. And I think that's something that's going to be pretty key, is to make sure you get a 4K TV that has that HDR if you're thinking of making that kind of jump, because that's with the high dynamic range, like that's going to be something that is going to help the future proofing of that set. Of course, you do want, the higher resolution, all that kind of stuff. And maybe you're not the biggest believer in 4K yet. I mean, I'm certainly someone who hasn't experienced it as much. So I'm not, a believer yet, but I'm not about to put, money into just saying, well, let's just get another 1080p TV. Like, if now is the transition time, now would be that point. And so that's very personal. That's a very, based on budget and your circumstances, like that's a very personal decision. But I just want to kind of just bounce the idea of where I'm at before making that switch. I'm not someone who wants to, necessarily get the Xbox One X, but I'm interested in the 4K Blu-ray playback that, for whatever reason, is on Xbox One S right now. Microsoft getting that as opposed to PlayStation 4 Pro, I think that's baffling. But I do want to use the PS4 more. I've been using that more as the gaming system of choice, so I'm looking forward to using the Pro for that. It can even be as something as small as, I like the look of white consoles, and so when you have Xbox One S that's primarily white, September 6th rolls around, and you're getting a white PS4 Pro, and you're throwing in Destiny 2 in there. So I may be playing Destiny 2, not necessarily a game at the beginning of the year I would think I'd be playing, but maybe I'll be giving it a shot for that. But it's going to be interesting to see, when the mass market does finally adapt to 4K, because it seems like when you're talking about TV sales, like that's primarily what they're pushing. Yeah, you could find the more budget 1080p units, but then you're not necessarily future-proofing yourself there. And the interesting thing is, for those that have not bought a house, like during the process, you are highly recommended not to make big purchases because they have eyes on your credit. And if you start buying, big units, big furniture, things like that, it's going to set off some red flags and it could invalidate the whole deal. So that's where I'm at the point of doing a lot of research and checking things out right now. So if you're curious on 4K TVs, like where I'm looking at right now, I want to get like the best value for the price. I know those OLED TVs are amazing. I have an OLED PlayStation Vita, the original model of it, a white PlayStation Vita for what it's worth. And the OLED screen looks amazing, but those OLED TVs, $3,000 to $4,000 when you're talking about a good size, like that's ridiculous. That's out of the question. Though currently Dell.com has a deal where you're talking the LG B6, which is like the top TV on the market, OLED, all of that. Normally a $4,000 TV. Dell's got this deal for $1,700 for a 55-inch, and you're throwing a $400 gift card there. That's pretty crazy. Still a little more expensive than I would like for the budget and all that, but I don't know, that's something worth throwing out there. But I'm right now thinking like a Vizio, like an M series, which is kind of their middle of the line there. They're talking really good picture quality there, and you still get the HDR, kind of future proofing that a little bit. You get the smart TV apps, so you're talking Netflix and YouTube at 4K. That's really exciting there. So I'll probably end up leaning more towards that. I don't know. I don't want this to come across like bragging or anything like that, but it's making me think about 4K gaming a lot more. And if I were not making this transition, I would say I'm plenty happy with PS4 and Xbox One and all that. But it's a big sort of life transition to move into a new place and start thinking of building some things up from scratch. And so I just kind of wanted to get my thoughts out there on kind of where the 4K gaming market currently is. And yeah, you can talk about PC and this graphics card and doing all the 4K gaming on the monitor. That's great, but with more of a console focus generally here, you're talking about the basic beginnings here, but you need that TV to take advantage of it. So I'm at the early outsets, and maybe I'll let you guys know in the future of the show where that kind of develops and if I'm sold and I'm a believer. But that's really all I have to say. That will do it for this episode of the Power Switch. We are hosted by rhymeswithasia.com, and we're on YouTube and Twitch at Rhymes with Asia. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Power Switch, and you can email us any questions, concerns, comments, or opportunities at powerswitchpod@gmail.com. You can subscribe to The Power Switch on podcast services such as iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, and if you could be so kind as to leave a review, that would really help as well. Now, most importantly, to participate in future episodes, you should join our community on Discord by visiting rhymeswithasia.com/call. Now, it's a small but growing community, and in these earlier months of the show, it'll be easier than ever to have your voice heard on this podcast. If you'd like a YouTube video to watch, with Comic-Con happening and all that, it's a big nerd movie time. My wife's favorite movie probably of all time is Kingsman: The Secret Service. And to see the new trailer for the sequel, Kingsman: The Golden Circle, to have that hitting in about a couple months on September 22nd, that is very exciting. It's a great trailer, really exciting. If you have not seen the original Kingsman, go see it. Be excited for the sequel like I am. I know it's not gaming related, but that's a YouTube video that's gotten me really excited over the last week or so. So do check that out. I'd like to try to stick to around this time, but we have to maybe be more flexible, especially with guests. I know next week, vacation for me over next weekend and then that whole week. So I'll be out in a remote area taking a little little time for myself, especially with all the house stuff going on. That it's definitely needed when things are currently out of our hands, and kind of have to wait that out. So hoping for Friday night we'll have another broadcast, and hopefully we'll get Logan and Max on that show. That'd be really great. So, but stay tuned to our Discord channel as everything progresses, and check out on Twitter as well at the PowerSwitch. Regardless whether it's live or on your own time, I look forward to you joining us for our next episode. With that, I'm Peter Spezia. Until next time, switch up, call in, game on.